Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of The Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today from northern New York, not the city, but from New York nonetheless, Dan Wos. Dan is the author of the Good Gun, Bad Guy series of books, also the host of the Loaded Mic, or one of the hosts of the Loaded Mic radio program that you can catch on YouTube. Dan, thanks for joining me today, man.
Oh, excellent. Thanks for having me, Paul. What are we talking about today? Guns and stuff?
Well, yeah, that's generally what we do. I'm just getting social media hooked up here. Facebook will not let me hook up social media until we're actually live. So I do want to remind everybody, if you want to get your comment in, comment either on the live Facebook or YouTube video, or if you're catching us anywhere else other than Facebook or YouTube, tweet with the hashtag Bullet Podcast. I get that actually the quickest, and we'll get your comments up. We'll discuss them on the air. First, when I did my news search for the day, I come across this article that I want to talk about, Dan, by this guy. Article written by this guy. I think he's pretty smart. The guy's name is Dan Wos. Showed up on AmmoLand. The title of the article: Despite media panic, it's your right to own the same guns as our military. You want to talk about that one a little bit?
Well, thanks. I don't know how smart he is, but it basically talks about how we have had some Supreme Court cases that may put the NFA and the Hughes Amendment at risk. We don't know. We're hoping, fingers crossed, maybe we can start getting rid of some of these terrible gun laws. But it starts off with 1939, U.S. versus Miller determined that a shotgun having a barrel of fewer than 18 inches was illegal because it had no relationship to the preservation of a well-regulated militia. So what it's basically saying there is that because it's not a military weapon, it didn't fall under Second Amendment, rights, which was interesting because if you notice from that point on, the gun grabbers were talking about the Second Amendment only applies to militia if you're in an active militia group, which is regulated by the government. Of course, they want the militia. They think the militia should be regulated by the government. But what that rule basically said was that military, weaponry was covered. So they're trying to say you can't have these military weapons unless you're in a militia. And then on the other side of their mouth, they're saying you can't have military weapons. But basically, what that Miller case said, it basically agreed that military-style weapons were legal for citizens to own. The article goes on to talk about Heller and Heller and McDonald cases, and then it goes into talk about most recently the Bruin case, which was a 6-3 decision. And it determined that the right to keep and bear arms included bearing arms for personal protection outside of the home. So this is another interesting thing that the Supreme Court has decided. It also determined this is real interesting, and I can't wait to see some lawsuits coming down on this particular aspect. But the Bruin case also said, when Judge Thomas wrote this, he wrote in that current and future gun laws must have historical tradition, must meet historical tradition. And they're not talking about, historical meaning last month. They're talking about colonial times.
Yes.
So this is really some really cool stuff, and I hope that some of our gun rights groups, and I'm sure they will get on this and start, creating some lawsuits in some of these states. Because basically what it says, and the article will explain in detail, you can find the article at AmmoLand. Go to ammoland.com, search my name, Dan Wos, and it basically says that we have the right to keep and bear arms inside and outside the home, protected from both federal and state overreach, for personal or militia use, with military-style weapons, or weapons that are in common use. So these Supreme Court cases have covered everything, and the idea that the gun grabbers are still going around the edges and trying to make everything illegal. We have Supreme Court cases that back us up. Really, the cases have been decided in our favor, and we shouldn't even be fighting these battles anymore. But unfortunately, they don't stop. So, just looking for some lawsuits, hopefully, to come down and start restoring some of our gun rights.
Absolutely, and a couple things. The text history and tradition that Justice Thomas was talking about. Again, we're talking about text history and tradition from 1790, which is when the Constitution was adopted, and we had just 20 years ago fought what at that time was considered a civil war. It was the War of Independence. We separated ourselves from England, and to get into the military, you had to have your own. When you were drafted into the military, or when you volunteered to go into the military, you brought your own weaponry, and the weapon you brought was exactly the same weaponry that the British might have. It was state-of-the-art stuff, and despite what our current occupant of the White House says, at that time, individuals could and did own cannons and ships of war. Those were not uncommon. There was even there's even part of the Constitution where it says there's no guarantee you're going to be paid by the government in times of war for the use of your warship. However, it doesn't say you cannot own one.
Right.
And the other, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that the idea of a militia is the people's army, and what that means is that average people, people who fought our Revolutionary War, they were average people. They were everyday guys, and the idea that you must be in a militia, first of all, is ridiculous to be able to own firearms. But second of all, in other words, it shouldn't be limited to that, is what I'm trying to say. But the idea of the right of the people to keep and bear arms gets overlooked by the gun grabbers. They don't even address the fact that in order to join a militia, you have to be able to have guns in your possession to do that. It's so silly that we even have these arguments, but that's where we're at.
Well, and they keep saying a well-regulated militia being, they keep bringing up that part, a well-regulated militia. Yeah. And then somebody goes and starts the South Dakota militia or the New York militia, and they lose their frigging minds.
Good point. Yeah, good point. Okay, so we have militias, and we do. We have militias all over the country. I've met many of them, and some of the nicest people that I've ever met, and very patriotic and really have their heart in the right place. And I tell you, these people took me in and really treated me and my people very well. So, but the idea that, they don't like the idea of, you have to be in a militia to own guns, they say. So, okay, so here we are. We have militias. Oh, but we don't like militias. It's so hypocritical.
Yes. We get a couple comments in here talking about your lawsuit. You were talking about lawsuits just a little bit ago. Mike over on the YouTube side says California should be prime territory for one of those lawsuits, the way the government here bans guns for no reason. Mike, I know for a fact SAF has got several lawsuits involving California. I know that there are at least two that involved the. Excuse me, my brain is starting to go into freeze up. There are two that involve the Firearms Policy Coalition, and SAF has got multiple as well. So yeah, California is going to get beat down in the courts quite severely. It's just waiting for the lawsuits to work their way through.
Yeah, and that's the problem with this whole thing, because same thing is happening in New York. We had the Bruen case was a result of overreaching New York gun laws. Basically, the gun law said you needed to show proper cause that you needed a gun. In other words, it wasn't a right; it was a need, according to the New York legislature. And you couldn't take firearms out of your home in New York City. And so this sparked a whole lawsuit that started in 2015. That Bruen case started way back then, so that's been almost 8 years by the time it made its way through the entire process. So immediately after we get the Bruen decision from Clarence Thomas, what does the appointed Governor Hochul do? She takes a whole bunch of new gun laws, lays them over top of everything, and says, "Nope. Now we're gonna here." She put in laws that are even more heinous than the original New York laws. She knows that they're unconstitutional. She knows that she just got defeated in the Supreme Court, and now she wants to see everybody's social media. There's all sorts of stuff. You can look through the new New York gun laws. It's more restrictive than it ever was. But here's the thing. She knows, everybody in the New York legislature knows that what they're doing is unconstitutional. They know they're going to lose in court, but they also know that it's going to take a while for those court cases to work their way through the process. So in the meantime, she gets to torture and torment New Yorkers. So and that's the way they do it.
Do you think this is just them buying time then?
I don't. Yeah. Well, yeah, because everything she's doing now, first of all, it doesn't meet the historical tradition. None of it. None of the new gun laws do, and or her new package, and so yeah, it's going to get overturned. And the problem is now you have county sheriff departments jumping through hoops. I just talked to someone from the sheriff department in Saratoga yesterday, the day before, and they said that they're doing everything they possibly can just to meet the demand right now, because as of September 1st, this new New York package of gun laws goes into effect, and everybody is knocking down the door at the sheriff's departments to get their carry permits before September 1st. So they're trying to do everything they can to meet the demand, and they know that and as far as I know right now, the new course, because it's an 18-hour course that needed to be created by the New York legislature at the state level, and it needs to be ready by September 1st. It's not going to be ready by September 1st, and they're going to purposely, I believe, prevent that new course study from being released so they can purposely create a window of time when nobody can get a handgun permit. It's very complicated, but yeah. I hope I explained that. But it's just a matter of tormenting. That's all it is. It's a matter of trying to win the political debate, torment gun owners, make things difficult, get her way. She's not even an elected governor. She was not one person voted for her. Now, whether she gets re-election, I don't know. We're hoping Lee Zeldin, beats her, but she wasn't even elected, and she's even more tyrannical than. I'm about ready to say something that you probably never believed anybody from New York would say, but she's even more tyrannical than Cuomo.
Yeah.
So
I'll get a comment in here real quick. Mike White says it's like a game of whack-a-mole with these lawsuits. The only problem is we've got a lot of lawyers, and so there's a lot of whacking we can do simultaneously.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Then also Michael, going back to the history and tradition, Michael over the YouTube side says the armament of the colonists was often a higher grade than that of the redcoats. That's absolutely true. Back then, you could buy whatever you wanted, and quite often, let's face it. Right now, one of the biggest shivers you can send up the spine of anybody that's served in the military is telling somebody that this is military grade. They're going to be going, "Oh God, it's crap." You know, a lot of people that are civilians go, "Hey, this is military grade, great." You talk to a soldier, they're going, "Can you do better than that?" So, what I'm salivating and thinking about is if the Hughes Amendment goes away, if the National Firearms Act goes, let's just say that 20 years down the road, we've beaten all these things into the ground, and the Supreme Court has sided with us again and again and again, and the other side eventually has to admit you get what you want, and I can go to Amazon and order whatever I want delivered next day to my door. I'm looking forward to a top-notch, fully automatic delivered to my door that I can upgrade at my heart's desire. And, you know, or if somebody goes into the military, they can have practical experience with the full auto. They don't need as much training as they do now. I think that those will be great things.
Yeah.
So let's we got a couple more stories I want to cover yet today. This not directly gun related, but it sure is good news. Yesterday was the primary in Wyoming. Liz Cheney has effectively lost her job. She lost her primary by more than a 2-to-1 vote. She couldn't even get half the votes that her opponent got in the Republican primary for House in Wyoming. Wyoming, just like South Dakota, only has one House seat. So she's lost her primary. She's in her seat until January. She's going to continue on the January 6th committee until January, but then she's out. And when CNN reached out to her, she's like, "Well, I'm in my seat till January. Then we're gonna have to think as to whether I'm going to run for president. I cannot let Trump become president." And if she can't even get half the votes she needs to win her primary in Wyoming, nah, I'm telling you, Liz, you ain't got a shot at the presidency.
Yeah, I don't have a heck of a lot to say about that, except that that's like not making the Pop Warner football team and deciding that you're going to try out for the NFL.
Yes,
it doesn't make any sense. But she's going to end up as probably a contributor for MSNBC or CNN or something like that, and that's going to be be
and she'll be their token conservative. They'll call her their conservative.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's people say, why doesn't she just become a Democrat? Well, the reason the Democrats loved her so much is because she took a Republican seat, but she voted like a Democrat. To them, that was like gold. Now that she's gone, the Democratic Party is going to disregard her like they do everybody else.
Yeah. Get PNW Woods says she doesn't care if she wins, just so Trump doesn't. You're right there. She's so rabidly anti-Trump. That's all that matters to her. She sees herself as a Ross Perot. I don't think she can do nearly that well.
Yeah. Well, it's also that anger. There's a level of anger over there on the left that you just don't really see on the right. I mean, we've all been angry. We've had resentment toward people. Everybody has experienced this, and it's an ugly thing, and it consumes you. But most people get over it quickly because they understand that it deteriorates your own life. When you let somebody live in your head for that long and with that much hatred toward that person, I can't imagine how she even sleeps at night. So, but the thing is that the left continues to cultivate that type of hatred and anger. It can't be good for them physically. I can't. Can you imagine? I mean, just living with that type of anxiety and hatred all the time over another person. You got to let it go. You got to relax. Maybe meditate, Liz, or do something. I don't know, but it's going to eat them up.
Yeah. Let me get a couple more comments in here. Let's go to Michael Schmidt here real quick. My gift from Fantasy Island would be a Chicago typewriter with the violin case. And then Pacific Northwest Woods. This is going back to if NFA goes away, if all that. I look forward to a full auto short-barreled shotgun and a shoulder replacement surgery to go with it, my friend. All right, let's Louisiana. This actually happened this past Saturday. The Louisiana Republican Party unanimously passed a resolution in support of the NRA's defense of the Second Amendment rights. Resolution begins by pointing to the Louisiana GOP's commitment to defend and promote the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution as memorialized in the platform of the Republican Party for all law-abiding Americans and permanent resident aliens. It then points to the more than 130 million firearms owners in the United States and emphasizes Democratic efforts to exploit and weaponize horrific mass murders to diminish and systematically destroy our Second Amendment rights through introducing more gun control legislation. Dan, this is just, I believe, a run-up to, we've got elections coming up in about just under 3 months, in about 2.5 months. A good move on the part of the Republican Party of Louisiana. This is the start of getting things in motion for a huge red wave this November.
Yeah. And I think people are starting to realize that, when they keep using these like mass killings and things like that, and they keep trying to attach it to guns, I would hope that even some Democrats would realize that the violence in our country it has nothing to do with guns, because we see it happening in other countries without guns. We see it happening in our country without guns. But it's a human violence issue that needs to be addressed. And I think even Democrats recognize that they're really chasing after a ghost here, which is guns, and they're not addressing the real issue of violence. And they're not addressing the fact that Democrat governors and mayors are letting people out of prison, bad guys out of prison, to go back on the streets to do more harm. And they do. It's not like we're making this up. The recidivism rate is unbelievable. And Democrats continue to do this. I hope the Democrat voters, I know probably not a lot of them are watching this, but I hope they start to see that it's really their voting, the way they vote, that puts them in danger. Because Democrats, they want to reduce everybody's ability to be able to defend themselves while simultaneously letting people out of jail. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, you're right. If we want to end mass shootings and end most crime in the United States, there are two simple ways to do it. You, number one, fix the mental health care problem we have. Starting back in the 80s, there were a lot of mental health programs just plain shut down by the Reagan administration, and things have never recovered since then. Number two, you take the criminal justice system, and if somebody commits a crime, they go to jail for that crime, they served that time. Period. There's no, he was just turning his life around. Well, he can turn it around when his 10-year sentence is up.
Right. And I've said these numbers before. When you take the numbers of you take the number of people in this country, about 330 million. And Paul, you've heard me say this. I think I talked about this in Dallas. You take 330 million people and you divide it by the number of violent attacks in America, which is 1.25 million or so. You really have about a 1 in 175 chance of being the victim, 1 in 275 maybe, being the victim of a violent attack. It's just the number of people divided by the violent attacks. The math is very simple. Why in the world would you want to be unarmed and helpless? I know some of these anti-gunners are maybe scared of guns, or maybe they've been conditioned to fear guns, and they've also been conditioned to hate the idea of guns and to hate gun owners, but that's all a mental conditioning that's been done to them. If they can step out of that for just a minute and clearly just look at the numbers of violent attacks, there's a lot of violence in this country, and do you really think that you're never going to be the victim? I don't like those odds, 1 in 275. I don't like it. So I carry a gun, and I think everybody should, just to be able to protect themselves and their family. So there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. We're coming down on the time we have. We've only got a few minutes left. Before we take off, man, if you would, please plug your book series and tell everybody about your radio show, man.
Well, the book series is right over my shoulder. It's called Good Gun, Bad Guy. It's a 3-book series, talks about the anti-gun mindset. The second book talks about the media's involvement in, like I talked about earlier, conditioning people into fearing guns and hating gun owners. The third book talks about the politics behind the gun grab. So you get a full understanding of what they're doing. It's kind of like the rule book that the gun grabbers never wanted you to have. That's Good Gun, Bad Guy. You can find that at goodgunbadguy.com. I also write for AmmoLand and other publications. You can find me at ammoland.com. And my show, The Loaded Mic, can be found at loadedmic.com, M-I-C, loadedmic.com. Great show. I think everybody's going to love it. It's a lot of Second Amendment stuff we talk about, but a lot of politics of the day. Lots of fun. Goodgunbadguy.com and loadedmic.com.
And for those of you watching live, I just put the screenshot of the Loaded Mic show up. You can find that over there on YouTube. That's going to do it for us today. Dan, I want to thank you for joining me today, man. And because of Dan's schedule, we had to go a little bit early. But Dan, thanks for accommodating me.
Oh, I appreciate it, as always, Paul. Thanks. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Live viewers, again, we had to move an hour early today, but thanks for joining us. And come join me again, 5 p.m. Central Time tomorrow and Friday. And don't forget, noon on Saturday for more Daily Bullet.